Good evening. I'm Scott Harris, Executive Director of Museums at the University of Mary Washington in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to a program this evening featuring both of our museums, Gary Melcher's Home and Studio and the James Monroe Museum. Both of our museums, as well as many others, have benefited enormously from the talented professionals at Richmond Conservation Studios. And for those of you who visit museums and see all the wonderful artifacts and works of art on exhibit and wonder how did these things survive, for one thing, and come to the public, but also how are they maintained? Because being products of human innovation and effort, things don't always go right. And sometimes even a very precious artifact or a painting can be subject to damage, either intentional or accidental. And it takes people with extreme skill, extreme dedication to be able to bring them sort of back to life. And we're fortunate to have two of those with us this evening. Now, we're also fortunate to have along for the ride Joanna Catron, Assistant Director and Curator of Gary Melcher's Home and Studio, and Jared Kearney, Assistant Director and Curator of the James Monroe Museum. Wave hi to them now, because they're going to go away in a moment, but they'll still be here because our museums are among the ones that are going to be talked about tonight. And if there are questions that come up later in our question and answer, Joanna and Jared will be along to help deal with those. I'll be introducing our speakers in just a moment, but I do want to say a couple of housekeeping words here for the program. We do thank the Friends of Belmont and the Friends of the James Monroe Museum, our supporters who really are behind so many of the things that we do, particularly in public programming. So we appreciate the support of those folks. The websites of our museums or the Facebook pages can give you information about not only our facilities, but also how to become a member. So we encourage you to look at that. We are in a Facebook Live situation here, streaming this, so there'll be an opportunity as you watch to post comments. Lindsay Crawford, our public programs coordinator at the James Monroe Museum, is working the board for us and will help pass those on. We ask the questions be on topic and succinct, and we will get to as many as we can after the formal presentation. You can post those in the chat area, comment area, a couple of different ways you can get them to us, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Do want to let you know that this program is being recorded, so it will be later posted on the YouTube pages of Gary Melcher's Home and Studio and the James Monroe Museum. So we are talking tonight with two conservators at Richmond Conservation Studios. Lorraine Brevig is the lead conservator. She has been practicing paintings conservation for over 38 years. I don't believe that, but that's what she says. I think she's far too young to have been doing it that long. But she does hold an MA from the University of New York at Buffalo in art conservation, also a BFA and an MFA in painting and printmaking from Virginia Commonwealth University. And besides being a skilled conservator, she is herself an artist and creates beautiful photorealistic paintings of pets. Elizabeth Fulton is assistant conservator and manager at Richmond Conservation Studio. She's been with the firm for over 12 years and has honed her structural skills well over that time period. A graduate of Mary Baldwin College, now university, in my hometown of Stanton, Virginia. Her art background has been helpful in digging up interesting information on the artists and subjects that her studio has worked on. Beth has had a lifelong love of art and wanted to be an art conservator since she was 16. She also loves to express her creativity in other ways through painting and gardening. So we are delighted to have Lorraine Brevig and Beth Fulton with us this evening. And ladies, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And welcome to Crazy Conservation. Oh, yep. Hold on. All right, hold on, just gotta bring it up here. So tonight we are going to be talking about all the crazy different things that we have seen in our practice over the years. And so
this is just going ahead without us.
and our studio was founded by Cleo Mullins, who has retired now. So Lorraine and I have taken over the studio from her. And she's founded the studio in 1982. So we've been doing this for quite a while for people in the state of Virginia. We are a studio that specializes in the treatment of paintings, in particular traditional easel paintings, polychromed objects, and occasionally other painted surfaces too. And on the screen, you can see just a couple of examples of the different kinds of objects that we've treated over the years. On the leftmost picture, it's a Reredos from St. Stephen's
St. Stephen's, yeah.
in Richmond. Then we have a painted cast iron doorstop. We have a portrait by Charles Wilson Peel of Fielding Lewis, which is a traditional oil painting. And then we have one of our former employees working on the murals at the Virginia Historical Society, which of course now is the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. And we conserved those over a number of years, about almost a decade ago now.
Yeah, at least.
So in this talk, we're going to talk about some different things that we've encountered that have been pretty crazy to treat, including vandalism, accidents, and poor decisions. But first, before we really start getting into that, I just want to give a quick overview about what a painting, how it's constructed, because a lot of that goes into how the painting is treated ultimately, and what kind of treatments we can and can't do to them. And we're also going to talk about the different lighting techniques so you can understand some of the photos that we're going to be showing you. So a painting is a laminar structure. Sometimes instead of the canvas and the stretcher, you might have a solid support panel, either wood or masonite are some of the things we commonly see. But the whole thing is that it is different layers that we're working with.
Yeah, and they all move at different rates. So that sets up issues with the degradation of the paint layers ultimately.
Yeah, movement is the bane of objects'
Yeah.
existence.
Say that again.
So this is a diagram of the different lighting setups that we use when we document paintings that we're going to be working on. And we do photographs of everything that we are treating because this is part of the important documentation process.
Yeah.
So with normal light, we have the lights at 45-degree angles onto the surface. So it kind of gives us the best overall normal, how you would see the normal viewing conditions type of lighting. Raking light is when you have the light source from one side and it's raking across the surface. So it shows all the planar deformities, any tears, rips, bumps, draws.
Basically shows it at its
Yeah.
absolute worst.
Yeah. We have specular reflection, which we don't use as often, but it is very helpful to show differences in changes of gloss on the surface, matte versus shiny areas, as well as sometimes also surface deformities.
Yeah, that aren't real evident in breaking.
Transmitted light is when the light source is behind the painting and it's coming through the painting. So it shows us things like losses, damages, places where it might be really thin. And then we have ultraviolet light, which we use a special filter for this on our camera, as well as basically a giant black light that we shine on the surface. And this can show us differences in varnishes, different kinds of varnishes that are used because they fluoresce in different colors. Pigments fluoresce in different colors as well. And in this case, the photograph you can see here, the darker areas on top of the green are actually areas of overpaint. So it can show us, different levels and things that have
overpaint
been
on
done.
top of the varnish, then overpaint under the varnish, and then sometimes it's so thick you can't even see but so far.
Yeah,
So,
those are fun.
Yeah.
Here's and lastly, we do infrared, which we have a special camera that's been modified just to take infrared photographs. And what this does is it kind of, in a way, shoots through the layers of paint. Really, it's very technical, but what it turns out is almost like a sort of very mild X-ray
Yeah.
to show us what's just under the surface. And in this case, you can see there's an entire inscription that was covered up that we could not see in normal light. And here it is overall. So you can see down here in the lower part of the table, it looks like it's just a blue tablecloth, but it actually has an entire inscription describing who the sitter is and what he did, which apparently this man, Dr. Sir Placido, was the director of the chemistry program at the University of Madrid back.
He's- Yeah.
Way
what-
back.
What was the date about?
I think he was born in the 1770s, I think.
Yeah, he's also a member of the Spanish Inquisition. I love that. Never
Nobody
expects
expects the Spanish Inquisition. And just a couple of things that you can expect from a conservator, things that we do, is that we document everything with not only photographs, but we also do written reports. We follow the AIC's Code of Ethics, that's the American Institute for Conservation. And we also use reversible materials. So anything that we can do can be reversed in the future. The only exception is cleaning to
Can't-
remove
Can't
grime
really
and
put the dirt
varnish.
back on.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. And then the other thing is our goal is to return the paintings that we work on to the artist's original intention as much as we
possible.
are able to,
Yeah,
which is not always possible, but.
do the best you can.
And here's just an example of me working on the back of a painting that was torn in half. And just some of the materials we use. And so here, let's get into it. Vandalism.
boy.
So this poor portrait was damaged by the sitter. She actually attacked the painting, who was painted by her husband at the time. And you can see that she basically took a butter knife to it and did a giant X through the center of the sort of face and neck area. And then she just tore it as much as she felt, I guess she was getting her
Yeah.
aggression out. And so the painting was then put into a closet and basically not talked about for about 50 years.
Yeah.
And then once the owner, who is the daughter of the subject, got the painting after her parents had passed away, she decided that she wanted it to come back to life. So we did our best to get all of those tears back in shape, cleaned it up, then filled and inpainted the losses. Here are the after photos, and you can see on the right photo, that's in raking light. And you can see the scars from where it was torn. And
There's only
There's-
so much you can do after a certain point, especially if it's left for 50 years, kind of distorted like that. You can't only get them back. Can't get it perfect, but there's always some scarring, unfortunately.
And in some cases like this one, it actually helps to kind of still tell the story
Yeah. this
of
is
what
true.
happened to it. And because, that's quite a
Yeah,
story to tell.
yeah, that's for sure.
This is another piece that we treated that was basically vandalized by college students.
Throwing
Um,
balls at it, I think.
Yeah, we're
Like
not really
tennis ball maybe,
sure.
or something, but it hit
Something smaller, I think, maybe about the size of a BB, because
Maybe.
it just made
Well, it made these little dents everywhere. And then
hundreds of
The
dents.
painting is very, very brittle. The ground and the paint layers, so it created these really dramatic sigmoid cracks and everywhere.
But you can see all the little circular cracks everywhere.
Yeah, when you smack a painting like that, really harshly like that, it causes, and the painting is brittle, it causes the sigmoid, which is like, it's like when you throw a pebble into water, it just sort of spirals
Ripples
out. And you can't see it right away, but it eventually forms and you get something like this.
And to treat this, we had to be really careful in getting those areas flat again while not flattening the whole painting, because I don't know if you can see those big shadows
Those
are
are-
from huge areas of impasto. The artist built up the paint so
think
high
there's
in some of
about-
those areas
About
that,
half an inch at least.
yeah,
Yeah.
that, you have to be really cautious and not flattening those.
Yeah.
And here's Dr. Sue Placido again. He had an accident, unfortunately, which is why we
Why
took
we
him
had
on. And in this kind of a case, it's actually more of an insurance claim. So our goal here was not to bring the painting all the way back to the artist's original intention, unfortunately, but instead just to bring it back to how it was before it was damaged, which basically meant that we repaired the tear and we removed some surface grime, but we didn't really get to clean it very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, he had a bunch of medals on his jacket too, didn't he?
Yeah, it's again, you can't really see it. I don't have a good IR on this, but and here we have a painting that unfortunately fell off the wall.
Yeah, it just sort of shattered.
It shattered. And you can see the picture here on the bottom. That's the back view of the upper, well, left corner up here. And you can see it just went
It's
into
like
several
20
little
some, 20 some, I
pieces.
counted every piece. It was like 26 little pieces.
Yeah. But we were able to get it back together
Yeah,
and
so,
get it cleaned up. So, and thankfully the owner had actually placed it in a frame and kind of sandwiched it so that it could at least, not move around and get more damaged until he could bring it into us. Here's a painting. So now we're talking about shipping damages. We're seeing more and more of these recently.
Yeah.
And this poor painting, which is aptly titled Broken Man, was damaged twice in shipping from Spain to Richmond. And this second time, the crate was pierced with a forklift during shipping, which caused that gigantic distortion and tear that you see in the detail photo on the bottom. The photo up top is the overall, and this was a gigantic painting too. This was about 4 feet by 6 feet. So it was a very large distortion as well.
Yeah. It's scarred, but it's better. And the other problem is that this is also acrylic, right? And acrylics are really difficult to work with because whatever solvents that we need to use to consolidate with or to do various things to help get the surface right, we can't use on acrylics because it dissolves them. So can't use that.
Yeah, they're just a
They're
little
kind of a pain, but
more difficult to treat.
yeah, but we have
But
to
not
use water-based, not impossible. We use water-based things to work on them mostly.
Again, everything's reversible and
Yeah.
hopefully not reversible to a point where it will reverse anything with the original.
Yeah.
painting.
Well, yeah.
And here's another shipping problem. This particular painting was rolled and we think crushed
Yes.
in the center.
But they rolled it
and-
without a tube.
Oh,
That's why.
yeah.
So it got
Don't do
squished. No, don't do that. And also I think they did it paint at inwards too.
Right.
So that's not good.
Yeah.
So
Because anytime you do that, you can risk crushing paint.
Yep.
Thankfully, this painting was new enough that it was able to be successfully relaxed.
yeah, we were able to tension it onto a new stretcher because
Yeah.
it was not on a stretcher. So.
And here's somebody who put their painting in their luggage.
Yeah,
their
suitcase, folded it in
suitcase.
half and then it got crunched.
Yeah. So we don't recommend doing that. This painting.
It was bought up from eBay.
Yeah. And this was one that actually Cleo bought. And when she bid on it, it did not look like the painting on the left.
No, it had actually a lot more paint left.
Yeah, apparently the the shipper decided to go ahead and just brush off all of the loose paint before he put it in a
Yeah.
substandard box and shipped it from Florida. So unfortunately, when it arrived, it was not stable at all. But
Mhm.
as you can see, we were able to put it back
Yeah,
together.
you did a really good job mending that and getting the consolidated. And then
Poor
cleaned
baby.
and then we had to fill in and paint it.
Yeah,
So.
which that's Lorraine's really good in painting down there.
Well, I worked with Cleo who understood that this was a costume and she knew how the costumes were, she does a lot of sewing and she knew how it was made and put together. So I was able to recreate some of this. And some of it's recreation. A lot of the stuff that when you do in painting is you've got stuff left over to go by. Sometimes you don't. So thankfully, Cleo was able to figure out what kind of stuff was going on there.
Fire damage. So we've seen several paintings with fire damages. We
Seen
get
a lot, actually.
quite a few claims a year actually from fire damages. And these are some of the worst that we've seen.
Most are just smoke and
Yeah, most are just
Soot.
kind of light smoke and soot damage. This is a case where there was a really heavy fire, so there was a heavy soot damage, but also something fell and hit the painting.
I think when
Um,
they were trying to get it out of the house.
Probably, yeah. And so it was a pretty bad scar in her face and lots of loss there, but we were able again to get her back. This poor portrait,
Mustard.
yeah, when a fire gets so hot and the painting is in the fire, it chemically changes it. Not only can it permanently alter the state of the paint, it can blister, and so it'll have like a bumpy surface to it. And then it can also permanently darken the color.
Yeah, the
paint.
colors will go ashy and gray. They'll lose
And
intensity.
sometimes they even kind of absorb the soot.
Yeah,
Depending on how hot it got and how close it was to the fire. And unfortunately, in this case, she was among the most damaged out of this plane.
yeah.
And she is permanently scarred with that sort of blistered surface.
They wanted to keep her. They didn't want to have, we usually will recommend them to have it reproduced. Maybe have another artist come and redo the painting, but they didn't want to do that, so.
And the worst example we have is
God,
Dalian Blaze Away. So this pretty painting,
beautiful.
again, was in a pretty bad sooty fire. And one of those companies that says that they can clean everything for your house said this was unrestorable.
Yeah,
They had tried taking one of those sort of sponges to it, which I do not recommend. In fact, if you have any fine art in your house, do not let these companies touch it.
yeah. This one though, thankfully had synthetic resin.
Yeah,
on it.
because it had been conserved before.
Yeah, and so there's only a little bit of blistering, but that synthetic resin really helped protect that surface.
Yeah, it actually absorbed all the soot. So once we removed the varnishes, we were left with the nearly pristine surface.
Yeah,
which
it was very
is-
lucky for the owners.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. So excess moisture.
Yeah, the one
and
on the left.
environmental-
That was like a pipe burst, I think.
Yeah, it was. And so anytime a painting gets extremely wet, and this is from accidents or maybe somebody taking something
That they
they shouldn't on the surface that's water based, what happens is that water actually can, first it can cause expansion of the canvas layer, and then it shrinks as it dries. And when it shrinks, that paint has nowhere to go. So that's why it starts to pop up. And we call that tenting because it looks like little tents on the surface.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're able to get them to go down, and sometimes they have nowhere to go. So
Yeah.
we have a couple methods to work with this, but some are more successful than
Than
others.
others, yeah. Yeah, this was left in an uncontrolled environment. There's no air conditioning, no heating, and it was left for at least 100 years like that. And so it began to just sort of explode off the surface.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we got to it in time before there was much loss.
Yeah.
So-
And this one, it's kind of a slightly different example because it is on masonite. So we think there was moisture, that it was exposed to moisture. But because it's painted on masonite with very little to no ground, and it's a very poor substrate to work with, it's not really compatible very well with oil paint. So it just started flaking like crazy. And unfortunately, you can see that there's a lot of loss, especially in that figure in the background.
But thankfully, yeah, this is a book cover, so the owner had a copy of the original book. And
So we were able
So,
to
yeah.
recreate it.
I could put his face back because I had a picture of his face, so
Yeah.
I could do that.
And it's not too often that we get to work with
No.
these kind of illustrative paintings. Because a lot of them aren't really considered fine art. You know, a lot
Yeah.
of people are,
They just tossed them.
Yeah.
But this fellow's collecting them, so
yeah.
it's become they're more collectible.
So here we have tornado damage. It's not very often that we come across the claim with tornado damage.
Well, it's tornado damage and really poor
And poor
restoration.
restoration, yeah. In this case, the tornado actually happened in the 1930s. And the painting had it, the the owners had it restored then, or sometime around that time period, which
Yeah.
they, they did the best they could. And they,
Paintings from the 1770s.
yeah, it was
So-
by John Duran, who's an early Virginia artist. And we've actually worked on several Durans before, and this is probably one of the worst ones,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But
She was a wreck.
as you can see in Raking Light, there is a lot of planar deformities where the canvas was separating from the lining layer, huge tears, huge loss you can see in the upper left corner. And then also, I don't know if you can see it very well on your screens, but there's kind of a checkerboard pattern to it. And what's going on there is that the artist actually painted on a fabric with different colored warps and wefts.
It's like a mattress ticking, but in two different directions.
Yeah,
It's really
so
weird.
some of the, depending on which thread was where, that's what you're seeing is different rates of expansion and contraction with those layers, which eventually led to paint loss, but mostly only within one color. So
When I first saw it, I thought it had been glued down to like corrugated cardboard or
Yeah.
something. And then it's just bizarre.
And here are just some more photos of this particular painting before treatment. Again, Raking Light at the top left. In the top right, we have transmitted infrared. So again, this is where the light source is behind the painting and coming forward. And then we're using the infrared camera on that. So it can really it does kind of act like almost as X-ray to see through the paint layers. And here you can see that big loss in the upper left,
The big loss on her head.
just above it and around her hand, and several tears and places of overpaint. And then the picture on the bottom again is ultraviolet fluorescence. So the green is one of the varnish layers, the top layer of varnish that we can see. And then you can see all that sort of dark colored stuff that looks like it's on top, all that's overpaint. But there was also a lot of overpaint under it too.
Yeah, I can see like 1, 2, 3 different layers of overpaint just looking at that picture.
Yeah. And here's some more during treatment photos of the same painting. The top left is where it has been half cleaned. So we've removed the dirt and grime, varnish, and some of the overpaint from the right half of the painting. The top right photo is the painting before we in-paint it. So this is after it's been varnished, cleaned, all the structural work is done and it's been filled. So all those white areas are losses that we had to put back.
Yeah.
And then the bottom picture is the picture of the back of the painting
I think
after,
it's upside down, isn't it?
yeah, it's upside down. After we removed all of the lining fabric.
Yeah.
But that is before we started removing any of the adhesives, of which there were at least 3 layers on
Yeah,
this.
I think there was the ground from the lining canvas that was stuck to the back, and then there was a white lead that was oil paint that was used as an adhesive. Then there was a hide glue that was used as an adhesive.
Yeah.
So you had to remove all of that.
So that took a little while to get all of that off
Yeah.
because we want it to be as clean and as smooth as possible on the back so that when we line it, we don't have that princess and the pea effect
Yeah.
where any little lump or bump can really be seen visibly on the front. And here's just the before and after of that same sweet portrait. And believe it or not, a lot of those details were there. And so again, Lorraine just sort of put in the missing
Yeah.
pieces.
Well, I consulted also with Shelley at the Point of Williamsburg about that, the flower crown. There was mostly still there. So I was surprised.
Yeah, you can see a little bit of that pink flower up here
Yeah,
at the
still
top.
there. It's just so covered with overpaint. But
Mhm.
Shelley was really helpful. She was great to help.
And we will do that as much as we need to
Yeah.
do that, especially when we work with institutions.
Oh, yeah.
We want to work with the curators and any conservators on staff to make sure that everybody's on the same page and
Yep.
that we're doing what is the right thing to do.
Yep.
And here's just a detail of the flowers because I think it's so
They
sweet.
were all still there. I was so shocked when she got all that crap off.
Yeah, so it's surprising sometimes what does show
Yeah.
up.
Oh, God, this guy.
This is, again, a not so great treatment. In this case, he looks fine here. It's a beautiful portrait by Charles Wilson Peel of George Washington at the Battle of Yorktown. And here it is while we're cleaning it. So the left picture is half cleaned and the right picture is after we've removed the top layers of varnish, grime, and overpaint. And it shows us this surface, which you can see all that stuff on it. It's actually Bondo.
Yeah,
Oh.
that pink stuff is bonded. There's a huge tear that goes up and over, and then that whole up his whole proper left shoulder is missing. So, and then there's that insert of somebody else's belly, on his coat. Somebody else's coat's been put on sideways.
Yeah.
So
But we had to pick all of that Bondo
that took
off.
about a year, didn't it?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
we had to do it under the microscope.
Yeah, Bondo is,
But I think they put the
not
Bondo.
good.
Yeah, no, it's hard as
they
rock.
put it on there and then they
They
sanded
sanded
it.
it. Yeah.
Mhm. We do not recommend.
No,
using
there's a
Bondo.
special place in hell for people who do that. I like
Here's some light damage, which honestly, we don't see this too often
occasionally.
as much with paintings because for the most part, paintings are a lot more stable. However,
But
certain colors are much more fugitive than
alizarin,
others.
yeah, alizarin crimson is made from a dye from the madder plant, which is a dye. So if it's exposed to light, it's going to fade. So we had examples left over. That whole bottom edge had been protected by the rabbet of the frames, so we knew
Which
what
is how we
colors.
knew.
Yeah. So we
Yeah.
got permission. Normally we would leave it, but the owner wanted to do. And thankfully, what we do is very easily reversible. So she wanted to do that, and so I was happy to do it. For
Yeah.
her. So I
And
think
here's-
it made a nice. The greens and the reds now are a little more balanced, and
Yeah.
and it's so much better painting. It's such a sweet painting.
And here's just a detail of that lower right corner.
That's an
And the
artist's
foot.
change or pentimenti.
Yeah. So you can
So-
see some of the,
Yeah, and they used a different kind of red. They used like a
Mhm.
iron oxide for that. So which is why it still looked red.
Yeah.
So, but we left it showing. So
here is a painting that this is cat damage, pet damage. I can't remember where this painting was left, somewhere
was lit-
outside, maybe in
no,
a
no, it wasn't
barn
outside.
or-
It was left on the floor. The owner had taken it
Ah.
down. He had dementia. The son said that he had dementia.
Oh.
And he set it down on the floor. He had too many cats. The cats, not only did they use it as a scratching post, but they also peed on it.
Yeah, so that was not
Smelled
so fun
bad.
when we
It's awful.
worked on it.
So,
Yeah,
But it made a nice change.
this is just an example of extreme fly specks.
Now that fly doesn't belong to the painting, but just an example.
Yeah, and this particular painting is an 18th century painting, we think.
Yes, by Hazelius. And these types of paintings were, they didn't have screens back in the day. And so the windows are all open in the summer and flies get in, they do their business on the surface and fly off. And the little fly specks are very acidic and they literally eat right through the paint and through the varnish and the paint. So dark areas look light and light areas look dark.
Yep.
And there's not much to do except pick them off if they aren't already gone and then are in paint. So,
So this painting, we think it was thrown out of a window because the building was on fire. This was a painting at Emory University. And we think the fire happened sometime in the early 20th century, maybe the late 19th century. So they put it in an attic and just forgot about it, I guess.
yeah, 400 years or so.
Right. So when we got it, it was pretty dirty and dusty and obviously had a lot of tears.
Yeah,
Again, we think because it was thrown out of the window to save it.
but we found the signature. We had a date and everything. It was wonderful. Nice change.
Yeah. And here's the
And-
raking. You can see we were pretty successful on this one in getting those tears to go
Surprisingly.
back. Right. Because the longer a painting is torn, the harder it is to get those
Yeah,
pieces
the
back.
canvas has plastic memory and wants to go back. So we're very glad to get that fixed.
Here's another poor restoration.
Oh, this one was rolled up and shoved under the porch during the during the
Civil War. Make sure those Yankees didn't get
to
it.
it. Yeah, this painting is 8 feet tall, by the way.
Mhm.
And you can see the lines when we got all the overpaint and stuff off. You can see the lines where it was rolled up and then swished. And then somebody came along and tried to restore it, and they
Used
put like
some real
plaster. They used
lumpy-
plaster
Well, first they lined it
Yeah.
awfully.
Yeah. And then
And
they
it was
used
very
spots.
lumpy. And so then they filled the whole surface with plaster.
Then they
and
sanded
sanded
it
it.
with a belt sander, and they sanded off the signature. I'm just like, oh my God, we don't know who did this because
Yeah.
they sanded the signature off. And this
Yeah.
is a really amazing portrait and a very unique, and I just, again, special place in hell. So,
Yeah.
but I love the dog. He's wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, this is hilarious. This is don't let your local artist restore your painting. That's what happened on who was the name of the artist? Is it
The
What
art,
was
the
it?
name of
Even-
the artist is Lloyd Freeman.
Lloyd Freeman, but the person who did the
I don't
restoration,
know.
I can't remember his name, but he liked to paint horses. I remember we had a couple of his horse paintings here. King, was his name King? Something. Okay, all right. He was from Fredericksburg, wasn't he? Probably. Okay, we're not supposed to talk about that. Okay.
But yeah, in this case, sometimes overpaint isn't so visible, but
In this
sometimes it is. In this
Yeah.
case, it was.
Yeah, it's
And
pretty
I think
ridiculous.
even the family was a little,
This isn't right.
yeah.
There's something wrong. here.
So they gave it to the Historical Society, which then donated the painting to us for our interns to work
interns, yeah.
on, which,
So they have been
it's
working.
still, yeah, exactly. We're still working on this one, but he's certainly come a long ways.
Yeah, that's for sure. Oh God, another. Don't let your local artist paint.
This
it.
time though, they used acrylic
Acrylics.
paint,
Yeah,
which
not oil.
on the one hand, much easier to remove.
Much
On the
easier.
other hand, it starts to flake off for you.
Yeah, this one is bizarre.
And they just covered
Yeah,
everything.
James McGibbon was not a very good painter to begin with, and then you have the UV of that. Oh,
No,
oh my
no,
God,
no.
that was scary.
And here's a painting that we finished for Mesta, which is a wonderful portrait by the artist Samuel Taylor. It's of Mr. Samuel Baldwin. I think he was also a major. And as you can see, he's just covered with dark, discolored overpaint, varnish, dirt, everything.
They changed his.
And for some
his
reason, they
collar,
changed
too. I
his
mean,
collar. Yeah. So here you can see detail of his head.
And they painted him with oil paints that turned green. It was like, yeah. So it was like the color faded.
But what's so amazing about this portrait is that while we had this painting in our studio, I had another client come in completely separate from this client. And she said, I've got a painting for you and I want to show you a picture. And she pulled out a picture of the same painting that
Yeah.
we had in this studio.
Yeah, it was the same guy. It's just painted by the same artist. but-
Yeah, same artist, same time period. He was contracted to do two sets of double portraits of Mr. and Mrs. Baldwin at the same time, and they descended through different parts of the family. And somehow they just both ended up at our studio at the same time. It's crazy. We've
Yeah.
never seen anything like it. Plus, we've never seen this particular artist who's done more than one copy
Yeah,
before. So that was really special.
it's really neat.
And you can see the painting on the right is the second painting that we got in, which you can see the collar matches a little bit more closely. But the one on the right is still covered with overpaint.
Yeah, the face especially.
yeah,
But she didn't
we
want us
just-
to remove it because she
we
liked
just-
the way he looked.
Yeah, we just did real minimal treatment to
Yeah,
him to
his
make
hand
sure
is
that he
different
was.
too, and the book is different. So,
Yeah,
It's
just
interesting.
slightly,
Mhm.
just slightly.
oh God, that one.
So this portrait is we think it's of Seneca, and it's by
It is
Raphael
definitely signed on.
Peale. And
No, Rembrandt Peale.
sorry, Rembrandt Peale. And so the family knew they had this painting, but when they were looking through the estate, they could not find it. So the owner brought us this painting and said, well, let's just see what we see. So Cleo started cleaning it. Seneca appeared.
Yeah, it was kind of fun.
Turns out the great aunts, I guess, decided
They
to use it
fancied
as
them-
practice.
Yeah, they fancy themselves artists, and they decided they were going to turn him into a Revolutionary War officer.
Yeah. Who knows why?
Yeah, who knows?
But thankfully we were able to
get it all
get it off.
Oh gosh.
And so one thing that we do see is people trying to fake paintings. And overpaint is certainly a good way of doing that. In this case, This painting was hanging in a courthouse and was known as Paul Carrington the Elder, who was one of the first judges of this particular courthouse. And unfortunately, this painting, once we got all that overpaint off, turns out it's about 100 years earlier, and it's a portrait of an unidentified man, probably English or British. Um, and again, we were pretty sure that this was done by an artist named Fred Peters, who up in New York in the 1920s and 30s advertised that he could paint,
No,
or I mean, that he could find a portrait of your ancestor done by anyone at any time.
yeah, that should have kind of clued
Red
you in.
flag.
Yeah, red flag.
So he particularly went after wealthy families. So that was the case going on here.
Yep.
And so we think that's what happened.
We've seen a couple, and I think there's a place down in North Carolina,
Yeah.
New Bern, I think has one.
Yeah, so here we are, James Monroe Museum. So this is a painting that we restored for the museum. It had a little accident. And as you can see, here's Breaking Light. The tear is just below the head.
Is
But
this the one that had been in a hotel and it said room, like on the back, it said room 3 or something? On
it
the
may
back?
have,
Yeah, I
it
think
may
it
have.
had been in a hotel.
And so again, we were able to successfully mend, fill, and repair this tear. It wasn't that bad. This is something that we would consider very manageable.
Yeah.
And then for Belmont, we have done several beautiful
Oh, they're
paintings.
stunning paintings.
You know, what an amazing collection of paintings. Of course, Gary Melchers is just one of the most amazing artists. And here's just a couple that we've worked on for them. And the one in the lower right, the lower left is actually not by Gary Melchers, but instead by George Hitchcock, who was a friend of Melchers, and is in their collection.
It changed really beautiful.
Yeah.
So happy to see that.
And here's one that we did for Belmont, which is a little different from their usual collection, which is why I included it here. It's a really cool little interior scene of a lady and her maid. It's been attributed to Adrienne van der Berg. And before we started treating it, it was so covered in dirt and varnish and overpaint. It really obscured the
You
whole
couldn't see
image.
much at all.
Right. I mean, you can't see in the before treatment photo very much at all that bed that's in the
Yeah,
background. That is a
that's
bed
right.
that's covered. And that beautiful cloth drapery. And I don't know if you can see this little puppy down there.
Yeah, there's some
Um,
damage down there, but it was not horrible.
So here it is in Breaking Light. And you can see that little damage down there. It was just a little puncture.
I think you may have a detail of it.
And then here we have that sweet
Yeah.
little puppy.
I love that dog.
And again, here's a detail that showed up after we were able to get it cleaned,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
like
the
big
chair leg,
chair,
or
yeah,
not
the
the chair leg,
table
the
leg.
table leg.
It's like a
which-
big ball at the bottom.
Yeah, and look at that beautiful detail on the
Yeah, all
bottom
that
of the
stuff was
drape.
there. It just couldn't see it.
Yeah, really, really beautiful. Here's another painting that was overpainted, and we don't
No,
really
why?
know why. they made an innis and turned it less into an innis. I don't know why. So they had completely covered up these sheep, and when we looked at it in infrared, we couldn't tell what was going on there. It just looked like these big blobs
Yeah,
of some kind of change, and we thought maybe it was just overpaint from damage, and they were damaged, unfortunately, but there was just no reason to cover
well,
them
I
all
think
up.
some restorers, people who do this stuff, don't know what they're doing. They just, it's easier for them to repaint something than to try to in-paint or to, they just, let's just slap some paint over it. Nobody will know.
Yeah.
And they covered up the bridge in the lower right too, and the signatures down there
Mhm.
too.
Down here. Why?
We do not know.
And here's some
Beautiful changes.
yes extreme varnish discoloration.
Yeah, this was found in the smokehouse. And then
Yeah.
there's water damage and
Mhm. There's lots of blanching around the
Dirt,
edges. You
yeah.
can see losses up around the top.
but it turned out so beautifully.
Yeah.
It was a real find.
Mhm.
The owner got it at an auction.
Yeah. And this is a painting that's actually double-sided. So when this painting came in, we unframe it, and there's a painting on both sides of
That's
this
so cool.
panel, which is not that common. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes we'll see things like
With
drawings on the
sketches,
back,
yeah.
sketches, but
Yeah.
not a whole finished painting. So it was really fun
Yeah.
to see that and to fix it.
Yeah, the one with the varnish was the front, and then the one with just the dirt, I guess, was never
Yeah.
the front, never
Re-
varnished.
Never really,
Yeah,
exhibited, so to speak.
but the
And
way it's done now, you can see both sides.
right, right. So that was one of the things that the owner wanted to be able to do, was to see both sides relatively easily.
Mm.
So we actually made a package with the panel and spacers around both sides, and then glass on both sides of the panel. You kind of tape that together so it's its own little package, and then you could put that in the frame. And with just a couple little clips, you can easily reverse it and show either side that you want to see.
Mhm.
So that's definitely one of the things that we don't usually see or
It's
do
very
around here.
unusual.
But and then we have a couple of big tears and needle paintings.
Yeah, that-
these
What is
these
that, about
paintings-
12 inches? 12 by
at
8,
most,
something like that?
yeah.
8 by
I
10,
think both
something
of
like
these
that.
are about that. And it was just, that big tear and not too big
That was
painting.
such a pretty painting.
Yeah. And this
Oh my
one,
gosh, yeah. Wow.
Sharp Top Flat Top, which is a mountain down in Bedford County, we think. And again, just what a change. It had that gigantic tear
I
that,
mean, not a dust and dirt. Can't see anything.
yeah. So it's just real fun to bring that one back to
Yeah,
life.
that's very sad. Oh, there we are.
And then our last slide of the night is this wonderful painting by
so-
Xavier Cugat.
Whimsical.
Yeah, and this is again something we don't normally see, which is he painted with day glow paint. So in ultraviolet fluorescence, which is at the bottom there, the painting glowed, and
just
it was
became
such a
something
surprise
so
when we
cool.
went to take photographs of it. I think
Yeah.
I ran out of the photo. I'm like, you gotta see
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
them.
Yeah.
So that's all we've got to share with you for today. I mean, we could go on for a long time.
Way too long. But any questions are very, very happy to answer.
Well, that was as entertaining as it was informative.
Oh, good. Good.
Y'all have a rapport and well, I think you said it before early on when you were referring to one of the works you did. You are successfully relaxed.
Oh, well, good.
And I think it made for just a really engaging presentation. Thank you so much. We're going to see as some of our questions might filter in here. I also will just let you know, kind of funny, when you did the little Monty Python nod about the Spanish Inquisition, the Facebook like instant transcribing called it the British Inquisition. So we may get letters. I'm not sure. But I do wonder, as we watch for some questions coming in, I have a question of my own for you. Have you you mentioned the John Durand, I believe that was the tornado damage one, right? And that you've done some other paintings by that artist. Does doing work on multiple works of an artist help kind of give you an insight
Oh, yes.
as to how to anticipate what you need to do, especially with a lot of damage?
Yes.
Very
Yeah.
much so.
Yeah.
There's several things that working on several paintings by the same artist can tell us, including, what his intentions usually are typically like. We know we can learn his palette, what colors he was using particularly, or she. And we also see the materials, we have seen so many different kinds of materials over the years, but being able to track one artist and seeing that, it can also help for us to say, yes, this is really by this artist, versus like something ain't right here.
Yeah,
We
this
come
is true.
across that too.
I think at this point, well, I hate to say it, we've seen so many Durands, we could probably tell you. But the thing about Durand is that he tended to, depending on how much you paid him, your painting would be more developed, there'd be more things in it. You know that term that, pay an arm and a leg? literally, I mean, that's the more you paid, the more you got. And so, and the more refined and more built up the surface would be. And that painting of Marianne Mayo was very sketchy and very thin. And probably because they didn't pay very much. So you get more of a cartoon with Durand. And I think he was really clear in his advertisements that the more you paid him, again, the more three-dimensional looking it got. So Winterthur has some amazing portraits by John Durand that are gorgeous. There's one with a woman with a lute and she's got this incredibly elaborate turban with pearls, and I mean, and then this drapery that's just with Marianne, it was just a brown background.
You get what you pay for.
You kind of do, with these art.
Yeah.
So.
We had talked about this before we went live, and then someone brought up, and I thought my memory was right on this. They said, is the George Washington painting one I saw at Colonial Williamsburg today? And in fact, there is a Charles Willson Peale of that same pose of Washington at Yorktown in the Colonial Williamsburg collection. But I believe you mentioned, that this is a private version, that there are multiple copies of that painting that were done in the period, right?
Yeah. It is very possible that the painting that is at Colonial Williamsburg right now, this could be that painting.
Okay.
We worked on it several years ago.
Yeah, when he came to pick it up, he threw it in the back of his pickup and ran off with it. Like, we still have the crate here, that we were going to put it in the crate for him.
Yeah,
It's like,
but-
no, I'll just put it in the back of my pickup.
Yeah,
It's a
but
$3 million painting, so
at that time, yeah.
at the time.
But I do think he was planning on lending it to institutions to exhibit. So it is possible that it is that same painting, but I'm not really sure. So
Yeah,
I can't say
haven't
for
seen
sure.
it, so-
But you thought there were a few versions
Yeah,
of it.
there's at least
least
17 known versions
17.
exist of that painting.
Some are bigger, some are smaller.
Mhm.
I think this one has some of the horse on the right cut off. There's a young man holding it, and there's some with more elaborate, with the young man holding it, and more of the horse. So it depended, I guess, probably how much you wanted to pay as to how much George Washington you got.
Well, for what it's worth, I'm looking at an image of the one at Colonial Williamsburg, and the horse's head is fully visible, and only part of the man holding it is. So I don't know. We could parse that all night and try to see which one is which there. But
Now, if you go to the museum, if you look very carefully,
that's right. Yes, climb up on the step. No, don't do
light,
that.
you can see a little bit of a scar around the insert.
Around
Yes.
the shoulder, yeah.
We
So
want to
look-
encourage visitors to not go up and touch the painting and look at it.
Do not touch the painting.
Yeah, but you can look.
Yeah, just don't go up there. Now, another question we got, and I think there's a number of things here that might be a plausible answer. But while we can't prepare for natural disasters, I think in some ways we can actually. Is there any way we could preventatively protect paintings from fire damage? And I'm guessing maybe I mean, there's some of the obvious, like try to avoid fires, but are there any storage media or other techniques that would provide, even exhibit media that might be fireproof or resistant?
Right. Well, in terms of something that is actually on the wall and exhibiting, because things that are back in storage typically are more protected just for having any covering over them. So, if you're storing your painting in a box, or, wrap it up in glassine and maybe bubble wrap and the box, something like that will certainly help protect your painting to some extent. Of course, if it's in the fire, that's not going to help, but
Well, one thing we've been recommending a lot to people is using museum glass on their paintings. A lot of people don't like glass on oil paintings, but the museum glass, actually the index of refraction is really close to that of air. And so when you're looking at it straight on, it looks pretty good, and that will protect it from, as long as it's not squished up against the painting, there's got to be some spacers in there, but
yeah.
the
Like
glass would
glass-
protect it from
yeah.
the smoke and
Yeah. It might even protect it some from the heat.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Another question, and I think again you could probably do an entire show just on the materials used, but how do you bring color back to paintings like that, is there a particular chemical that you use? I imagine there's more than one.
When you say when you mean color back, you mean
I'm just reading how do you bring back color to paintings like that? What chemical do you use now? And I guess in part, of course, you say part of that restoration of color is taking off over layers of varnish and dirt and the like. But
I will jump in briefly and say I think the question is really asking like how you bring it back so vibrant, because the paintings you're showing, they're dark, and I think the question remains like, how do you pop the color back vibrant? Do you use the same paint cut, like paint style, the same like type of paint, everything like that?
So when we're cleaning a painting, first we're using different chemicals, water-based solutions, solvents. Really, it's all dependent on the painting itself, what the condition is, what's been going on with it, what has happened to it, what other people have used in the past. So I have to do a lot of testing on it first to make sure that, one, I can safely remove all those different layers that we don't want on there, which is grime, discolored varnish, over paint. So we're trying to get those off as best we can. And occasionally we even have to pick off over paint or like overfills, like the Bondo on George Washington. And then once we get the surface as clean as we can safely get it, then we put on a varnish layer, which we use a synthetic resin, so it won't yellow for a very long time.
It shouldn't yellow at all, actually, but it will cross-link a little bit, so that makes it a little tougher to
yeah, but that really saturates the colors and makes it more like what it should look like for the most part. You know, modern paintings are a little different because not all of those are meant to be varnished, but when we're talking about older traditional easel paintings, they should have a varnish on the surface.
And then when I go to in paint the losses, I in paint over top of that varnish layer. I don't in paint directly on top of the original, and I don't use oil paint. I use a mixture of dry pigments mixed with synthetic resin, and so I match, you know, and I know what colors were being used at the time this painting was painted, so I can look at it and see this is the colors I need to use, and then I just use the colors to match.
Basically recreate the palette using this, you know, dry pigments, so that we can get it as close, as accurate as we can to what the artist originally
I
would have
prefer
had.
not to use the arsenic based paints or the lead based paints, so I have modern equivalents of
don't do that. Is there any one time period that y'all might consider harder to work on than others when approaching restorations?
Modern.
Okay.
Just because, you know, you get used to working on certain kinds of paintings. And so older paintings are sort of much more straightforward in a lot of ways.
There's a traditional oil painting, there's a way they were put together, and they were put together, so of course
but more modern paintings aren't necessarily put together in those ways.
No, there's not a lot of academic training with paintings, even though, you know, I went to VCU for undergraduate and graduate painting, and my professors didn't know much about how to put together a painting properly, and a lot of my classmates didn't care. And I had professors that said, when I went to graduate school for conservation, that said, well, if it's worth it, we'll find a way to fix it. But I have to tell you that, especially working on acrylic paintings, they're very, very difficult to not just to match the colors, but to get the surface correct and using materials that are easily usable.
You showed us a lot of different types of damage, sort of a rogues gallery of things that can happen. Is there what type do you see the most is one of the questions we get.
Oh, just a lot of mishandling, a lot of tears, a lot of scratches and dents. And
you said forklifts was a surprisingly common problem.
Oh, we're
seeing it more and
often.
more.
Yeah, we're getting, it's like a month doesn't go by when we don't get at least one or two phone calls about, you know, USPS damaged my painting and shipping, or UPS or FedEx or somebody. I remember that one that was it looks like they slammed the door down on top of it, and
like in the middle.
and it was like freaky. It looked like a bow tie. Poor painting. It was a loss. People decided not to do anything. There wasn't much left. least they didn't put it into a washing machine.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So-
Somebody did that, just to let you know.
I think this question, I don't know if it directly pertains to the one that you would, or to one, a comment you made earlier, but why do we sometimes see paintings at galleries without glass on them? I saw a lot from the 1650s that didn't have that protection. So, I mean, in the period, I believe I'm correct that you would not have seen glass over oil paintings most of the time, but that's more of a modern sort of a conservation intervention, right?
Much more modern
Yeah,
conservation
yeah.
convention.
You know, just regular glass is really heavy, and especially for really large paintings. And it's just recently the modern, you know,
Right.
acrylics and things like that are kind of
Yeah.
are
Especially,
able to be used.
especially with the advent of, you know, these True View and water glass and these other art conservation glasses where, again, you know, you can't really even see them in certain lighting. It doesn't look like there's anything on the surface.
Yeah, I think when you're straight on, they look best. When you get to the side, you get a little bit of glare. But,
Yeah.
we just recommend it because there's so much that can damage the painting, and you know, just I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, a lot
Especially
of
in a museum.
museums,
Yeah.
especially with our museum clients, are doing that more and more frequently now.
I hate to
Is
say
putting
this,
paintings behind glass or acrylic
yeah,
to help
Acrylics-
protect them.
yeah, you can't really put a varnish on an acrylic paintings, and dirt and grime build up and dust build up on the surfaces of acrylics really quick, and you can't really clean them very well. So, you know,
We're just at a little past an hour, which is fine. We're not, you know, gonna abruptly cut off here. I will alert Joanna and Jared that I'll probably ask y'all to come back in a moment and just get any comments or observations you might have about working with y'all. I do have a question here, and again, this could probably be a show of its own. Maybe we'll have to think about this. Any frame recommendations you have?
Beth is good
wow.
at that.
You mean like framers?
It's any frame recommendations you have. I don't know if that would refer, apparently framers. Now, I don't know if you want to get into specific, what are the attributes you would look at for a good, reliable framer?
I would look for someone who offers the museum glass options. In particular, True View is a good one. Optium products. And you really want, there are different levels of it, so you just have to be careful what you're getting and what you want to get. I would also ask your framer, you know, what kinds of, you know, how they proceed with things maybe, or where they store your art. And for example, you know, I wouldn't want someone to throw my painting, you know, into some stack with other paintings at a studio, you know, like it should be cared for. And if it's that fragile, you know, you might want to take it to a conservator or a restorer who can, you know, treat it a little bit more carefully and help you get a proper frame for it and make sure that it's properly framed. Some other things that we do is we put rabbit felt in the rabbit edge of the frame to help protect the edge from rubbing against the painting surface, because that rabbit edge can cause a lot of damage. Make sure you use D-rings for hanging, and double picture wire if at all possible, because that will help protect it from falling off the wall.
Yeah, don't let your framer use nails to put your painting together. They
Please
need to
don't.
use something with straps or offsets.
Oh.
Yeah.
With paper pieces, pastels, things like that, UV protection is so important. Watercolors,
And
acid
also-
free materials are real. With paper pieces, proper framing is like 90% of your preservation of your piece. Yeah.
This was a question a little further back up, but I think it's an appropriate time now to say, I came in late. Please tell me more about your place and where are you located? So here's your commercial, insert commercial message here.
All right, so we are located in Richmond, Virginia, particularly at 3202 Rosedale Avenue. We're very close to the baseball diamond, so very easy to get to off of 9564. And we are a traditional painting studio, restoration, conservation studio. And we work on primarily paintings, but also other painted surfaces.
Some polychromed objects too, yeah. So
Want to throw a website out there? We'll just go
Sure,
full commercial.
richmondconservation.com.
Hey, say again?
richmondconservation.com.
Oh, that wasn't much of a stretch, was it, to get to that? That's good.
If you Google
Ooh,
us, we
I made a
show
pun,
up.
a stretch. Well, here are the reviews. The reviews are in. You two are terrific. Thank you. You two are amazing. This is amazing. Thank you. Super interesting as always. So you've got some repeat fans there who've apparently followed you along. Jared, I wanted to, and Joanna, just wanted to bring them back in if they've got an opportunity just to talk a little bit about the experience of working with y'all. I will mention that, and you made a reference on the painting that got a tear in it for the James Monroe and about the hotel. That was in the Parker House Hotel in Boston for many, many years. And through a weird combination of circumstances, people who owned the hotel for a while were friendly with the former editor of the papers of James Monroe, and they gave him the painting to give to us. And it is a product of Edgar Parker, who was an artist in the late 19th century, also had been a doctor previously. He was in the Union Army in the Civil War, fought at the Battle of Fredericksburg, ironically, but then became known for recreating works from famous artists, including the Gilbert Stuart
we
painting.
found the inscription on the back. Yeah.
Yeah, there's and so it had a very strange path getting to us, but Jared, any observations or thoughts about that experience?
Yeah, I will say right off the bat that they were absolutely amazing to work with, and it was really astounding, because with a tear like that, you figure it's going to be fixed or anything, but you cannot tell. I mean, it's smooth. I mean, I was amazed. I was like, wow. So, whatever magic you got going on in that workshop of yours, Santa ain't got nothing on you. You keep it up. So, I also will say, just a random note, the Parker Hotel was where they claim they invented the Boston cream pie of all things. So who knows?
Yes.
Anyway,
Yes.
but yeah,
And,
if I throw my 2 cents in there, that would be it.
You can still go there today. You just won't see as good a period arch from the 19th century.
That's right.
Joanna, we have quite a few examples of works in the Gary Melchers collection that they've done. And again, I guess I'd ask, how do you feel that collaboration has been with Richmond Conservation?
Well, every curator wants to have a good relationship with their conservators because it is a collaboration. And in the case of Gary Melchers, it's all the more so because he was known to fiddle with his pictures well after he signed them. He'd go back and forth with these things. And also we began to suspect that Mrs. Melchers would mess with him. After he died, she was very worked hard to get his pictures out on exhibit and to sell. And sometimes pictures that had never lived their life in frames, she was framing for the first time and would mess with them around the edges to make sure that they fit in frames. So what often happens is I'm bringing examples to Lorraine and Beth, and we're trying to decide, well, is this Gary? Is this Corinne? What do we keep and what do we let go? And that seems to happen almost with every picture, even pictures that aren't by Melchers. We're thinking, is this an earlier restoration? It certainly is sloppy. What do we do? Because earlier restorations are also part of the story of the painting. You really have to think about, it's a historic preservation question. What do you want to do with what's been done after the picture was completed? So Lorraine and Beth are fabulous. They've always given me options, and extremely talented people, and they've been very, very good to our interns. I have brought interns that expressed an interest in conservation to their lab, and they've given them plenty of time, and that is such a kind and collegial thing to do, and I much appreciate that. So yeah, they're a terrific team.
Thank you. We feel very privileged to work with you. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much. Joanna Catherine, Jared Kearney from our university museums, Lorraine Brevig, Beth Fulton. This has really been just a marvelous program, and we hope that it's been informative for folks and maybe inspire some tender loving care for some great works, both privately and in museums. And Lindsay, thank you as usual for keeping us technically on point. We will remind our audience again that you can look on our YouTube channels for the museum, see this available later, and we thank you for your attention and wish you a very good evening.
Thank you so
you.
much.